All right, guys, it's Thanksgiving week. Who is coming to your house that you wish was not coming?
Oh, shit.
Thankfully, I can say no one.
Come on.
We're doing a very small one, just immediate family, not going anywhere far, and I'm super excited to have both my kids back from college.
All right, how about you, Mike? Who do you wish wasn't coming?
I'm going to plead the fifth.
Come on.
I will share a funny kind of related to what Paul said. So, Brahms Dairy, that's at least in this part of the country, ice cream store basically.
Okay.
We were having our Sunday dinner that my daughter comes over for, and she says, "Hey, I want peppermint chocolate chip ice cream." They only come out with it during around this time of year through the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife, I don't remember what we had this week, but she's like, "Oh God, I didn't go get Madeline's peppermint ice cream." So she says, "I'm gonna run up to Brahms. I'll be back." So she goes. She comes back with 2 quarts of this, and it sells out annually. Like at some point, you can't get it anymore. So we go through dinner. They're like, "Oh, let's have the ice cream," and Madeline says, "Hey, can I take that other one home?" And my wife says, "Well, no, because Andrew will be home from college next week, and he's going to want some." And it turned into this whole oldest child, youngest child favorite thing. Like, "Oh, you're getting him ice cream. He's not even going to be here for 2 more weeks." Anyway, it turned into a whole thing. But
that's funny.
Like Paul, I'm thrilled they're coming. I'm thrilled the whole family's coming. But there will be elements that I wish, I didn't.
So, do you have someone, Jason?
Well, one of the nice things is my in-laws are coming into town, and normally be like, "Oh no, the in-laws are coming." But one of the nice things is that my mother-in-law also lives close by us, and she's got a rather large townhome with tons of extra rooms. So we're gonna have fun, partying up with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, but nobody else can be staying at our house, so that's kind of nice. We did solve the ice cream thing though, Mike. We bought an ice cream machine, and my amazing wife makes ice cream on a regular basis. So
there you go.
And now my son's learning how to make it too, so that's really good. And fresh homemade ice cream is the best.
Hey, Metalworking Nation, welcome to Making Chips, the longest running manufacturing podcast, equipping and inspiring manufacturing leaders since 2015. I am Paul Van Meter, and I will be your host today. And I am joined by the OG host, Jason Zenger, newer host, just like me, Mike Payne. Welcome, guys.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah.
I think I need to change that little part of the script though, Paul, because I believe we released in December of 2014. I think I put 2015 because it's been at that point, it's like a full year of podcasting.
Yeah.
But we're coming on 10 years now.
10 years.
So,
that's huge.
That's pretty epic.
Yeah, we need to have a party.
I'd almost like to hear the story someday of how 2 middle-aged men even knew what a podcast was 10 years ago.
Hey, I was still young back then.
I was going to say you might have been
you
might have been even in your late 20s or early 30s.
Yeah, I was in my my 30s at least. So
30s
absolutely, least. Yeah. So yeah, we definitely should talk about that.
Well, I am super excited for this episode. It is releasing right before Thanksgiving, of course, and a season to be thankful. And we are here to talk about ThankAMachinist. You can see it on my shirt. I've been beating this drum for years now about ThankAMachinist, and certainly the audience that listens to this show knows how critical it is to our economy, to our world, to everything that exists. And it's our mission, of course, to make sure that gets outside of just the machining industry and to the general public to understand and thank machinists for the essential work they do to make the world possible.
Love it. Yeah, absolutely, Paul. I was just briefly, I was looking at a news article, and it was about what makes manufacturing cool, and it's where they were connecting these middle school students to take videos of manufacturing facilities and, the cool things that they make in order to educate these middle school kids. And I thought that was a pretty cool program that the schooling system there was doing to make manufacturing widely known, because we need to do that.
Manufacturing Day every year. It's just fantastic that shops and other manufacturers open their doors for schools and other people to come learn about what we all do in this industry.
I know we talk about it. There's been several Making Chips episodes, and then you see it in a much broader sense across the industry where everybody talks about, just more and more exposure to what manufacturing means is going to help us bridge that skills gap that we have too. So
I think it's time for, manufacturing to go mainstream. And, I think that unfortunately, manufacturing and the great things that the machinists do largely gets thrown into this like bucket of industrial.
yeah,
Somebody created this term of industrial, and it seems to get like kind of thrown into this bucket where it's like, okay, well, we're going to talk about machinists for 30 seconds, but that's about it. And I think that, they deserve to be put in a better light, in a better spotlight. And I think that's what we try to do on Making Chips. But, I had an interesting conversation with Tony Gunn when he was here in Nashville. And, I've got some really, I think, unique ideas for how to tell a story about the metalworking industry and, do something that's a little bit more mainstream. And him and I were talking about like how to ideate something like that and really make it a thing so that the general public can consume how important machinists are for our industry and for our country, for the economy, for everything.
That is such a great idea. And we know if Tony Gunn's involved, it's going to go big and be seen
Yeah.
by a lot of people. So
Absolutely.
And it's funny you say that. When I was, quite honestly, I threw into ChatGPT, why are machinists important? And just like everyone does, and when I hear about it, it's like, yeah, machinists are essential for industries like aerospace, automotive, and medical. And that's it. It's like, how about everything else? How about food? How about our clothing? How about, electronics? How about the desk you're sitting at, the headphones we're wearing, the house that you live in? Like, none of those things could be possibly made if they weren't traced back to a machinist. So, and speaking of machinists and the importance of it, the manufacturing news we're going to do this week is really quite about this. So I looked up what some recent news was, and I found this really fun article, just got released. And this is the title: Military contractors are in every small town in the United States. They go on to talk about, CNC machines and, speaking to the layperson, it's code that's written and go into automated machines to make components like a ball bearing or a missile wing. But they go on to say that local machining companies are small businesses, many with as few as 20 employees, and they support huge aerospace industries by manufacturing integral components for weapon systems, aircraft, vehicles on a contract basis. Go on to name a few shops, including New Hampshire's Granite State Manufacturing, and continues on. There's about 17,000. Now, I've heard different numbers, but somewhere around 17 to 25,000 machine shops in the US. That's over 330 shops for every state. We know that's not equally distributed. Some states have way more shops than that. Some have less. Interesting here, good news, the compounded annual growth rate of machining from 2024 to 2030 is looking around 7.8% compounded annual growth with a current value of about $100 billion.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah,
I'm surprised by that number. Number of shops, I thought it was much more than that. I thought that there was 10,000 in, the Chicagoland area alone.
I've always read 35,000, but I mean, but there's also, like, I've actually tried to research and find a number, and there's not one.
It's so hard to find a number.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Absolutely.
It's a lot, and they're
It's a
essential,
lot.
and they're everywhere. They're in every little
And
city.
it's nice to see that there's more that are, entrepreneurial machinists are opening up new shops. I think that that's a great thing.
I am going to name a couple as we go through and actually thank some machinists. So
yeah, let's do it.
All right. So I can't pick specifically just one machinist. I know far too many and don't want to exclude anyone. But one thing I know is true. They are absolutely heroes of the economy. As I said, nothing could be made without them. And I actually, before we get into some of the naming or the people, I want to do a quick little game with you guys. I would love you to think of your favorite hobby, and we're going to talk about how a machinist directly contributes to you being able to do that hobby.
I already know mine, and it's too easy. Jason,
I know you're going to talk about golfing, so go ahead.
I'm not.
You're not? Oh,
no.
Okay.
So if I really go
drinking whiskey,
I'm not. but you are hitting all my expensive hobbies. I'm going to talk about my true favorite that I don't get to do enough.
Okay.
And that's fly fishing, and that I just teed up a softball.
That could not be more soft. That could not be more soft, Mike, because we know that our friend Matt Lindsay from Autopilot, one of our great customers, but part of their business is making fly fishing reels. And you guys got hooked up together. He sent you one, and you've been loving it. It's an amazing
piece of art, honestly, more so than it is a machined piece of metal. And I think honestly, I mean, I think just given where my head's been most of my life, I mean, part of my appreciation for it is the hobby and the catching the fish and or trying to catch fish. But I think, I mean, I find myself lots of times I am also drawn to things that you can physically touch like that and see, and you can buy $100 fly, you can buy a $30 fly reel, or you can buy a $3,000 fly reel, and they'll both catch or not catch fish. But there's something about the beauty of like what Matt Lindsay's doing and several others.
Kind of like buying a watch. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
You can buy a watch for like a couple bucks, and you can also buy a watch for millions of dollars.
right.
Most of that difference goes into the craftsmanship of that piece.
Well, and to speak to what I just said for me personally, so like I tend to gravitate towards watches. So like my nice watch, my dress watch I have, the back of it is clear and you can see
Hmm.
the gears inside. That's why I like it. It's
Yeah,
it's
That's
not
super
because it
cool.
tells time better than my phone that's
yeah.
always in my pocket, but I do like that aspect of being able to see the precision that goes into that.
Yeah. Well, typically they say that the ones that are less popular and cheaper tell time more accurately if you're talking about like down to the second according
Yeah,
to,
sure.
whatever the world standard is. Simply because they're not mechanical watches, I think are the kind that you have, and those are the really nice ones. They're not, I mean, they're usually very accurate, but they're just not on par with,
Right.
say like a digital watch or anything like that.
Right. So anyway, I mean, that is a total softball, but
Yeah.
if I'm answering it honestly, that is it.
So what about you, Jason?
My hobbies have changed quite a bit since my near death experience. So now I really enjoy reading. Prior to that, my passion, and it still is my passion, although it's been up and down. My passion's been weightlifting. I love it. It's something I really enjoy, getting in the gym and pushing heavy weights. And then I also really enjoy pickleball. So, and obviously the weightlifting side of things is pretty obvious.
Pretty obvious. Yeah,
Yeah.
all those
Yeah.
machines, of course, they start mostly with fabrication, right?
Hmm.
Extruded, steel tubing, cut, welded, but then they're putting
Yep.
in machine bushings and pulleys and
Yep.
all that stuff. Funny
Yeah.
enough, I like a year or so ago, at my gym, they have a set of free weights dumbbells where they're molded rubber, but the outside surface on the end has a full-on machining surface, so you can see
Mm.
the end mill that like surfaced off the
Yep.
end of the molded rubber.
That's
So
cool.
Hmm.
you just right there, it's
Well,
all machine, machine marks. I
yeah.
love it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could buy, instead of rubber, you could buy solid metal
Oh,
free
sure, yeah.
weights, which I normally use, just all free weights. And there's some really nice stuff out there. Now, I do know that, when you're making, say, like Olympic plates, there's a lot of standards around the distribution of weight around that. And, there's probably some kind of sophisticated process that has to do with the material science and the way that it's machined and stuff like that in order to maintain that integrity of the weight distribution and, making sure that it matches, and is consistent through, the manufacturing process. I don't know too much about that, but I know that it's a real thing.
Absolutely. So if you are out there and you like weightlifting, you can also thank a machinist.
What
There
about
you
you,
go.
Paul? Paul, what's your hobby?
How about me? I mean, I'm a diehard car guy, so obviously cars
Softball.
can't exist without
Yeah.
without machining. And in fact, one of the reasons I fell in love with machining so much was when I was in college and we were in that vehicle design program where we were designing and building cars every year. We had almost no budget to actually go buy things, but we had tons of free aluminum that Boeing had donated to our school, and we had CNC machines. So the cheapest way for us to make anything at all was to machine it out of billet. So our car was.
We got to clarify. When you say you had no budget, I mean
We had
that
no
could
budget.
that could mean you didn't have any money or you had an unlimited amount of money.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
that's a good point. That's a good point. You're right. It could be either
I
extreme.
think we all knew.
In this case, we had no money. In fact, one quarter, I actually withdrew from school and donated my tuition. More importantly, my parents did, to the team, because we weren't going to make it to competition without that extra
Holy
few
cow.
$1,000s. So
That's
yeah,
commitment
it was
right
the
there.
money was tight for sure. But anyway, fell in love with machining, fell in love with cars even more, and so yeah, that's a softball for me as well.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned watches, because I'm going to throw out my first ThankAMachinist. There is a guy that I follow on LinkedIn. His name is Josh Hacko. I don't know if either of you follow him. He They do
No.
super micro machining. He's in Australia, NH Micro. Go look it up. He makes absolutely incredible parts, shares the pictures. He has lots of followers that love watching and seeing the projects they do. But they make watches, and they are absolutely impeccably beautiful. They're stunning.
Oh, I'd love to see him.
Yeah, I'm gonna check
I could
that
be in
out.
the market for a watch.
Good. Well, hope you have a big wallet because these are not cheap watches.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yes. I'm sure. The hashtag ThankAMachinist is one that I try to use frequently. But I want to give a shout out to a number of folks that are also using that hashtag, at least on LinkedIn. I didn't go research other platforms, but just a short list here. Shout out to Greg MacArthur and the team, including Jeannie at NTL Industries. Definitely using ThankAMachinist quite often. Jacob Sanchez, Nate Ankrum, who's actually a former guest on Machine Shop Mastery, president of Genuine Machine Products. Our friend Nush with her new podcast. She's been using ThankAMachinist. Tony Gunn, of course. Thomas Nathan, Chris Lukey, John Guillemond, Josh McCain, Gene Davis, Thomas Smith, and Const over at Digifabster. All people just in my feed if I put in the hashtag. So if you are listening to this, use the hashtag ThankAMachinist more often. We definitely need it to get
Love
broadened.
I know I've used it
Love it.
occasionally, but I really do need to make a habit of using it more because it's such a, it's an important thing, right? That's why we're talking about it, right?
Yeah, it is hard to keep up with that. I know exactly. I got the Instagram handle ThankAMachinist and started that, and I posted like 6 times. And so if I'm having trouble with it, it's no problem. I give you some grace. But actual machinists that I want to shout out to, a gentleman I got to know several years ago. His name is Gary Keel. He works at a shop called Trillium Machine near Portland, Oregon. He's been a machinist for more than 40 years. He's worked on things ranging from the space shuttle to he worked at JPL for several years. So making stuff that go into space and, all the other things that are not as super cool and exciting, but, just a 40-year veteran in the industry, a guy that clearly has had a big impact in all the customers and all the products that have ever come out of that shop. True craftsman, true expert machinist. And that's a breed that there's not, enough of anymore. So it's important to thank them for that work. I have 3 others. 2 of them are actually sets of brothers that I think are super. Coming back to the comments earlier about younger people starting shops, Nick and Tanner Priest of Priest Machine and Assembly, 2 brothers that had never even stepped foot in a machine shop before, but got consumed with watching YouTube videos on machining and decided to buy a CNC machine and start a machine shop from scratch. So going well today. And Nick has been on my podcast as well. James and Sean Servin from Servin Solutions. Same exact story. 2 young brothers fell in love with watching YouTube videos on machining, bought a machine, and now they think they have like 4 or 5 machines, just crushing it, growing, probably in their maybe late 20s by this time. But just absolutely super cool that people are finding it, falling in love with it, and then having the impact as they're having with their businesses. So
yeah, that's one of the things that I really hope for with my boys is that maybe a couple of them decide that they want to do that and start up a shop, and I'd be happy to fund them in order to get it going. I think that would be fantastic to see them in business together. So I think that'd be pretty amazing.
I think that's probably a dream that I share with my boys, and probably many parents do, at least in the industry. And then the last one I want to specifically mention, a guy that I have just absolutely been just so impressed by. His name is Nathan Bourgeois. He is the owner and founder of a company called Ouroboros Space and Defense near Golden, Colorado, or outside of Denver. And the reason that I particularly wanted to call him out is, and his story, again, really dug into it on Machine Shop Mastery, but he started out as a welder for car parts and, had some success in that, but really fell in love with, when he learned about machining, and now makes the most unbelievably complex parts they specialize in turbo machinery for rockets. So they make really complex, really hard geometries, really tough materials, pushing the envelope, helping the companies that they serve, which are mostly space companies, push the envelope of what they're able to do. And again, to have someone relatively young like that get inspired and just go all in on the industry, we need more of that. And want to shout out to them, to Nathan and his team, for doing all the incredible work they do.
Yeah, that is amazing. Thank you.
What about you guys? Do you have any specific machinists or companies that you want to say thank you to?
As you guys know, this year, 2024, has kind of marked my struggle to live and to just kind of get through the traumatic event that I went through. And one of the things I talked to my wife a lot about this when I was in the hospital, just drawing her attention and the nurses and doctors' attention to all of the machines that help to keep me alive and all of the parts that actually went into my body. I mean, I don't have particular machinists, but what I would say is like any of the machinists out there that are, machining, medical related devices. I mean, I love you. Thank you for, even if you're not didn't directly work on stuff that helped me. I mean, the fact that you help people to live and to thrive and to have a better life. I think that that's amazing. I mean, I've got this wound on my shoulder, or just like where my arm and my in the base of my body, my chest are. It looks like a bullet wound. It looks like probably like a 50 caliber bullet wound. But it was like this, highly machined piece of metal that was, inserted into my body. And I don't remember exactly what that one did, but I've had everywhere from, these machines that were hooked up to me with very high precision, made parts that drew out my blood and then oxygenated it and then put it back into my bloodstream. Stuff that helped, pump my heart. I mean, like, the list goes, kind of on and on. A lot of monitoring equipment that was, inserted into my body, and you don't want to mess with some of that kind of stuff. You want that made to the highest quality. You don't want any mistakes made or anything like that. And so I'm very thankful and grateful to those machinists that take that notion of making a high quality product so that people can live and have a better life. So it means a lot to me.
That
And
is
even
super meaningful. Yeah.
and even in your
Yeah.
recovery, I mean, I know we were talking the other day, and
Yeah.
we talked a year ago. I mean, you're waiting on your prosthetics
Yeah.
that are
Oh
machined
yeah.
by a client of Paul's.
Yeah. So like Naked Prosthetics in Washington, they're making my hand prosthetic. So
Yeah,
like as you can see, I had amputation of my fingers, and so I'm waiting on these. They're essentially it's like a glove that will go on my hands, and then as your hand articulates, they built these. I don't know if you call them sensors, but some kind of mechanical device that because your fingers actually extend into your hand, or or your whatever, your tendons and joints and stuff like that, it actually articulates with the opening and closing of your hand, so that you don't have to like go to it and like close it yourself or open it yourself or anything like that. So I'm waiting on that to arrive. Hopefully, should be here by the end of the year, and very thankful for those machinists at Naked Prosthetics that are making that for me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very cool. And it's not
Yeah.
just machined parts, it's carbon fiber parts that are molded, but
Hmm.
then those molds, of course, are made by machinists. And
Yep.
so, yeah, machinists all the
There
way
you go.
through.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What about you, Mike? What do you got?
well, I should have gone before Jason because he touched on a little bit of what I was going to touch on,
Okay.
but and the reason I say that is because the suggestion of doing a podcast on Thank a Machinist for Thanksgiving I thought was brilliant, and I hope this is something that we'll do every year. So
Hmm.
when this question was posed, I kind of looked back at the past year, and Paul, I mentioned, I know I've used the hashtag Thank a Machinist a few times, and the one time that stands out to me was sitting on the plane flying home from Nashville after Jason had his heart attack, and I actually wrote that Thank a Machinist post sitting on the plane,
Mm.
um, because of all the things Jason just said, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have to thank you really for bringing that hashtag to light, at least from my first experience, maybe a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at when I look at just my personal experience, I mean, I've been around manufacturing for 25 years, whether it was in the software business or in private equity. But it wasn't until I bought a machine shop 7 years ago where I really understood the profound impact machinists have on everything, whether it's me getting to escape in the mountains and fly fish, or save Jason's life, right? I mean, there's different, maybe relevance of impact there, but but it still touches our everyday lives, right? Being these unsung heroes, and great analogy when you think about just what was it, less than a month ago, the all that was in the news cycle for maybe 2 days was that SpaceX caught a rocket out of the middle of the air, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
if you think about that, I mean, at some point that was someone's idea that put it into a model and a piece of paper, that it took some machinists and other tradespeople to bring that to reality. And when we understand the mission and the impact behind those types of things, I mean, everybody was amazed, right? But Elon got the credit for that, right? But the people you're talking about, whether it's Nathan in Colorado or the thousands and thousands of other people, suppliers to SpaceX and the SpaceX employees that brought that to life, is where the attention gets lost, right? We recognize the inventor and the visionary and all those things, but I know we all have I know we've all read the books about visionaries and executioners, and you need both. And those
Absolutely.
things, Jason's life wouldn't be saved. We wouldn't catch a rocket out of the middle of the air. I wouldn't, I still may not catch a fish, but I wouldn't have the opportunity to.
You mean they can catch a rocket, you can't catch a fish?
Well, not always. I think that overall impact, it's lost on you until, like, I took the deep dive where I live it every day.
Yeah.
And then I think you can't also talk about ThankAMachinist without just also talking about, like, as a group of people, they might be the most high quality group of people as a general statement. I mean, these are just hardworking people.
Yep.
They want to come
Salt
to
of the
work.
earth.
They want to do a good job.
I was just going to say that, Paul.
Yeah. And I could thank every one of my machinists individually. And the fact that their norm is to do their best, right? And they're operating in tolerances and so forth that most people can't even comprehend, and the importance of that, and their recognition of the importance of why is that little groove at a plus or minus half a thou, and the way they strive to do that and to do better every time. They're just quality individuals. I mean,
They sure are.
If I had to do it just personally, I would just have to thank every single machinist and welder and fabricator that I have at Hill Manufacturing. I mean, we help make the world go round through oil and gas and a lot of other industries, and those guys make it all possible.
Yep.
Absolutely. I like that term, salt of the earth. And, people always, use that as a word to say, just a genuinely good person. And I should probably go back and look into the context of it and come back to the, Metalworking Nation about, what it actually means. But I presume that it comes from when Jesus told people to remain salty. And I don't know for sure. I'm just kind of making an assumption there that's where it came from. But
sounds like a good
I don't know if you guys.
GPT question.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys know offhand, but
I
yes,
don't know.
that's definitely true.
Obviously, shops that make medical devices and shops that build parts that catch rockets, are amazing, are essential. But even something as everyday little activity, and I was just thinking about this. I don't really eat breakfast cereal anymore, but certainly my kids do and did, and I
do
tons of it. All right, very good. So you go down to your breakfast cereal, right? The box that the breakfast cereal is in, of course, was made on a box making machine and printed, in high resolution. And all of those machines are made mostly of machine parts. The bag that the cereal is in was blow molded, very likely, by a company that makes blow molding bags. And that entire piece of equipment is made by machinists. The cereal inside, of course, was originally, farmed, and the grains were harvested by tractors and combines and other things that are made up of machine parts. And then the cereal itself was baked and cooked and cut and whatever by machines that make cereal. And then it was delivered on a truck made by machined parts. you just can't even have your breakfast cereal without thanking a machinist for every single step of the process for that cereal landing, in your bowl.
That's great. I'm glad you were able to trace that back, Paul, because I never even thought about like just all of those little components that come through there. And one of the things that my wife and I used to joke about when I was in the hospital was I all of a sudden after I had my heart transplant is that I had this like affinity for eating cereal in the morning, which I never had. And our assumption was that I got like some 20-year-old's heart. We ended up finding out that while he wasn't 20, he was like I think like late 30s or early 40s or something like that. But yeah, I didn't realize that all of those machinists in those different industries went into producing the cereal that I all of a sudden really started to enjoy. So it's good.
Yeah, and that's genuinely what I mean, that nothing in the modern world would exist without machinists. There's not a single thing you can come up with that isn't touched by the hands of a machinist at some point in the value stream, from mining it out of the earth. So miners use equipment that machinists made, to the farmers, to it's all full circle. Yeah. And I did just look it up. You're right. Salt of the earth comes from the Bible.
It does. Okay.
Yes.
That's kind of what I assumed. Yep. That makes sense.
But what were you going to say?
So that's so being salt of the earth is about as good a compliment as you can get.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe now is a good time to do our wrap up.
Yes.
Obviously, machinists are the ones that keep the machines programmed and running and cutting chips. And that's important, because if you're not making chips,
you're not making money.
You're not making money. Bam.